It's Paul Clegg here, and I've got the pleasure of introducing somebody that I met some years ago, a rather strange-looking fellow, not mainly in the fact that he was wearing half of him was a boiler suit, or what looked like a boiler suit, and the other half was a very smart business suit. And I was quite intrigued by this. I want to introduce you to Chris Farnsworth, who runs a business called Raising the Baa. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, and I know we've picked a day which is perfect for you because it's not sunny and you have quite a bit of sheep on your farm. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm actually a contract shepherd. I go around doing everybody else's sheep as well as my own.
And you said you were shearing a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I was shearing yesterday. It was dry, warm and sunny, and that's when we need to get the coats off the sheep.
And just as an interest, how many sheep can you shear in a day?
I can, at a push, shear about 200 a day. That's one every 2 minutes.
Wow, that's incredible. Chris, tell me about Raising the Baa and how did it all start?
Well, you know how you have these ideas and nobody ever really, it's a throwaway idea and you just leave it on the table and walk away and you get on with your life. What for us was really interesting is that I was talking to a chap who was setting up a youth charity with communication and learning challenges. And he was explaining how you set it all up and everything seemed to be in place except for this team building event. And coming from the farming background, I immediately said, well, you ought to get them down on the farm, run them round, lose a bit of energy, and then, hey presto, you can do something with them. The next question really floored me. He said, well, what do you mean? I was going, oh gosh, I've got to think of something. And I said, well, being a shepherd, getting the sheep in the pen, doing something with the sheep, well, that would be quite normal. That's the only thing I've got at my disposal. And that's where it all started, really. I mean, it was just a question of getting the sheep in the pen. I thought that was the easy part. But when a group of people have to work together to get the sheep in the pen, well, 2 hours goes in no time at all.
I very often say to people that when you're dealing with a diverse range of people in a corporate environment, in whatever environment, it's a little bit like herding cats, especially when people have got their own personalities, their own way of doing things. So really, I should really start to say it's a bit like herding sheep.
Sheep are really good at recognizing people, which is possibly what people don't understand, but actually they recognize faces very quickly. And what they will do is pick on the weakest person. So it's not a question of just going, well, I know what I'm doing and that's it, follow me. It's about empowering everybody around you to do the same thing.
So what sort of companies do you work with?
We work with large multinational companies, global companies, who want to invest in their people, see people development as a real key. But what's really interesting is they can be from any field. I mean, we got people from Nationwide, Volvo, Waitrose, a whole host of financial services, those sort of areas, which is just to name a few. But they tend to be the larger companies who really understand the ability of getting a team on board and going in one direction.
What sort of challenges or problems are managers in these companies facing that they want addressing, that they feel that you can address?
Well, the big thing which most people will say is that there's been a reorganization, a different boss, global split up of teams, and they just want that good communication to come about. When times change, you need to make sure everybody is on the same page, heading in the same direction. And we believe the best way is to make sure that that communication is done, face to face at the beginning, so that you can build up all those key factors which you need in a team.
A lot of people out there in whatever size business, are going to be considering what their teams and what their company is going to look like after the lockdown. Where do you see Raising the Bar being able to help people answer some of the questions they've probably got right now about what form the team will take, what they want to achieve with their teams?
Well, after a period of turmoil, which I think the lockdown has been, everybody's reevaluating exactly their position. It's key to get everybody on board, heading in one direction. And what Raising the Bar does is actually get them out in the fresh air, get them out in the fun part, having that experiential learning. And just because you're having fun, you actually learn more than actually just sitting down and doing a load of theory. Where Raising the Bar is really very different is there's no right or wrong way of getting the sheep in the pen. There are many solutions. You know, often people will say, oh gosh, right, are we doing this right? Is this the solution? There is no right or wrong way. They have to work together, agree a plan, and to execute it. What you notice is that there's 5 key behaviors. You know, everybody knows what the result is, getting the sheep in the pen, but you've got to do everything beforehand, which is committing to the plan. You've got to trust your colleagues are going to back you up. You have to empower your colleagues to get the sheep into the pen. But that might cause some conflict. But you might say, oh, conflict isn't good. But actually, you need that conflict for the trust. Because if I come to you and go, I'm not getting this plan, you want to hear about it before you're executing it, because otherwise what will happen is the sheep will pick on that one person because they're not committed and will run through the gap. That's where Raising the Bar is so different than anything else.
I must admit, my background is working with people. Working with sheep sounds a real challenge. You just told me that the sheep will very often pick on the weakest person. That can be quite daunting. I mean,
I can understand that when, especially if you're fearful of animals, you know, perhaps you've been in the town, very comfortable with people around you. It's a very safe environment. You're suddenly out in the countryside, you're fearful of animals. But this is the point. The point is actually, in your workplace, you might be asked to do something which you're not very comfortable with. Let's say it's asking for money, or possibly even asking for a pay rise, or you're not very comfortable about your working conditions or something like that. It means you're not performing at your best. That's the same with the sheep. If the sheep will keep picking on you, you've got to be able to go, look, I'm not very comfortable with this. You also need to be able to put forward your case and say, look, I'm not happy with that. What you need to do is to ask for help. And actually what you need to do is ask your colleagues to back you up, because let's face it, if you're closer to your colleagues, you feel more empowered. So it is about making sure it is a level playing field for everybody. And again, because you're taking everybody out of the workplace and you're giving them most probably an experience they haven't had before, then you're going to get that level playing field and going, right, now we really have got a challenge. Is there any issues we need to be talking about?
My first thought was maybe confronted with getting these sheep into the pen, and probably as a typical male, I don't know, I'm thinking of how I would do it. But of course, I on my own, an individual on their own, can't do this. They've got to rely on the team. So you've got to be able to think about how you're communicating, presumably, and also playing to each other's strengths. Absolutely.
And again, the male attitude, the Achilles heel of the male, is immediately taking the lead. Right, I tell you what to do. This is how we're going to do it, and charge off. And the females invariably are quite quiet and thinking about other things. And you've got like Mars and Venus sort of like colliding and going, well, we aren't even thinking. Nobody knows what my emotions are. the guys have gone off and done the plan. And you're going, well, no wonder it didn't work. It's when those two bodies come together that, it just explodes. Everybody's working together. Yeah, you're okay. We check in with our female side. That's really important. That's the difference between actually achieving it and not. The great thing is, I'm not standing there being the judge saying, oh, you didn't this quite right with that quite right. The sheep will not go in that pen unless you are working together. So you have to impress the sheep. Sheep have very different characteristics per breed. So I could give your team, because sometimes some people come to us with saying we want a really difficult task, don't we really want to learn hard here? And you're going, okay, so I'll give you some more challenging sheep, and others, just want a bit of a washy feeling. Then you choose different sheep. So if you really want to learn, harder sheep will challenge you. You've really got to be very succinct, and there's no error, there's no margin for error.
I can see from your website you have a variety of different ways in which you can introduce the concept of working with sheep. You do 2-day events, you do half-day events. What sort of events could one become involved in?
For me, the real great advantage of Raising the Baa is to see where your people are at with a half-day event, and you can sort of get a measure of where everything is. Then you want to be able to train them, and that can be in-house training, or we can supply some training to actually address some of the issues you saw in the half day, and then to come back with a day event where you actually make sure they've learned everything that they have learned beforehand. So they sort of understand the basic principles of sheep and, getting them in a pen. Make sure they've understood them, because then we'll raise the bar really high, and to get them to really do a hard task, but to make sure when they're under pressure, they are going to work correctly.
Have you have any experience and working with salespeople at all?
Salespeople are always the interesting one, because they always talk a great game, but when it comes down to it, they just have to make sure they've got great communication skills, but often it can be, how do I put this, barked at, right, you do this, you do that. And actually that isn't the way to get people on board. The way to really generate the enthusiasm where they'll go over and above what they're expected to deliver. Does that make sense to you?
Possibly. I think salespeople working with marketing people could be quite good, or marketing people working with the engineers could be particularly good, because the engineer talks one language and the marketing person talks another.
Absolutely, and you see that all the time. Big companies come out, they get one from each department, but you can sometimes have stand-up face-to-face arguments, going, why did you do that? That wasn't part of the plan. And it's fine out in the field, but if that's a microcosm of what's happening in your workplace, you need to address it. And the great thing is, actually filming it, you can review it, and you're going, are we falling into this trap again? Are we doing something else again?
I'd forgotten that. You actually you film every event, don't you?
We do film the event. It's only basic filming, but it's very revealing on what happens during the day, because if you look at the film, you think, gosh, you notice a particular habit sometimes in an hour and a half into the event. And actually, when you scroll back through the footage, you see that same behavior happening at half an hour, and you actually only notice it after an hour and a half. Therefore, it's a great way of going, look, these little things matter. Don't wait till the hour and a half to notice it. Notice it at the first half an hour rather than any later on in the program.
You must have had so many events. What's the strangest thing that's happened?
Well, the strangest request was, a large search engine wanted to do an event in the middle of London, and we worked out that we could actually run it in a large car park in the middle of London. So we'd have to take the sheep up and do all of this, and that was really quite fun.
Well, that was the strangest thing that's happened. What's the funniest thing that's ever happened?
Well, the funniest one I got to say was Burnley Football Club, where they all turned up in the same uniform. So they were in their tracksuits, and that was fine. We had two teams, so we split the teams. And what was really interesting is we had the first team and the second team, or the reserve team, and they both went off and did it. And the two attitudes were completely different. One group had their dummies being thrown out of the pram and, real challenge and didn't understand it. But the whole approach was on football and how they manage a football pitch. And it still worked, getting the sheep in the pen. That was but the hard work for me was identifying who was which and what. They didn't have their names on their back. They just had ordinary trainers. But the good news was actually they got promoted into the Premier League in that season. So I felt we had a big part to play.
Well, I know there's a few teams out there that have difficulty getting the ball in the net, so getting the sheep in the pen might be another challenge. You've just talked about the work you've done with Burnley Football Club. And I'm sitting here, coming from a corporate background, I'm identifying with Volvo, IKEA, Waitrose, etc. What other businesses have found value in what you do?
Gosh, that's a big question. I mean, there's obviously a lot more companies which we can't mention, but I think every company should, if they're really interested in getting a well-oiled team, is to develop the people around them, because that's the essence of making a team really work, in my opinion. I mean, even if you've got the smallest team, we work with numbers from 10 to 16 per flock per shepherd. So you have your own field. It needs a minimum of 10 people to get the sheep in the pen, and a maximum of 16 is because actually then you can't have anybody just hanging on. They've all got to work to get the sheep in the pen. If you sort of go, oh well, we'll just stretch the numbers and we'll just put 25 in the field, you'll have 5 or 10 people just wandering around the field and not really being used. So that's why we stick with those numbers.
I've been involved in management in a corporate environment in my younger days, and I found there's two types of manager that I come across. One is the newly appointed manager. Maybe they've come from a sales background, a marketing, engineering background, and because they're good at that, they've ended up as the manager. Big challenge. And also the manager that has been doing it for years in his or her way, and the company and that person is not making the progress and keeping up with what's happening now. Do you find, obviously those two types of people could be good. Do you approach those people in different ways?
There's sort of a checklist for the shepherd to go through the event, and we're looking out for certain things, and we have a certain sort of coaching style which is really empowering them to make the right observations and to distill what it is. But the interesting thing about managers is the two extremes I've seen in the field, where one manager came out and he said, look team, I don't know anything about sheep. I'm quite happy to facilitate this meeting, but don't look for me for any solutions at all. I know nothing, just like you do. So, if you want me to facilitate it, I'll do it. That's no problem at all. And the whole team unanimously said, you're the guy, you facilitate it, we'll just pile everything in, we'll do it. And needless to say, they got the sheep in relatively easily. The other manager who came out in the field saying, oh no, I'm part of you lads, I'm all in, just let me go. First attempt, it suddenly went wrong. He said, no, I'm watching, that's it, that's fine, I'm watching, I'm going to take the observing role. And he went, okay, that's fair enough. And just as the team was about to get them in to the pen, he goes, no, make room for me, I'm part of the team as well. And I was thinking, my gosh, that's an interesting, and what was interesting is that actually that revealed a lot more to his colleagues than he possibly observed.
And do you have discussions about what the individuals have seen in the other in others? Because it can be quite an eye-opener, can't it?
Very much so. We on the day would give them an informal debrief, but actually, it's always interesting to reflect on it a little time later to make sure they're not falling into the same traps all the way along the line.
Chris, it's been fascinating listening to you today. And I've got one last question though. I know that on your website, and when I met you, one of the talks that you were giving was about, in life, are you the sheep, shepherd, or dog? What's that about?
Okay, so I ask people this question, and most people will go, oh gosh, I'm definitely not the sheep because they just follow. I'd like to think I'm the shepherd, but think about it, wait a minute, the dog's the one running around doing all the work. Oh, does that mean I'm the dog? And yeah, it can be sort of like, oh gosh, I'm the only one actually doing everything here. If I wasn't here, where the sheep would be. And as a consequence, I put this talk together to explain the sheep. The sheep is very much in the comfortable zone. So, the sheep live in the now moment. They look for easy opportunities. Sometimes we keep them behind electric fencing. It's only a little bit of a shock, and yet they don't go to the green field the other side. They just stay where they're comfortable unless they're really pushed. And then if they're in blind panic, they'll do amazing things. But primarily the sheep stay in the comfort zone. If we come on to the dog is the person who's got tremendous focus. You talked about salespeople. They know what the target is. They go and get it. They very much focus. Athletes are great dogs. Just help me go higher, faster, longer. That's their attitude. They'll go and do it. They've got tremendous focus. And that's the same with the dog. The shepherd's the interesting character, because what makes a good shepherd? And what makes a good shepherd is he does three things. The first thing, he deals with the detail. It's really important that you have the detail to understand the sheep on an individual basis. You've got to deal with what's happening with the sheep, not only this week, next week, month's time, year's time, if you're talking about breeding programs. So you've got to also have that focus on the long term as well. So not only are you dealing with the detail, you've also got to have the long-term focus. But the third thing is the most important thing. And the third thing is to make sure you can see it from the sheep's point of view, as well as the dog's point of view. And the important thing about working with a dog is you've got no telling off ability. The dog does not understand negativity. So if you're in the workplace and you couldn't say that wasn't very good, how would you get over it? Training a dog is exactly on that principle. So how you train a young puppy, and I've got a 6-month-old one at the moment, is you only ask it to do what it can do and then tell it what it's doing. If it does it badly, you immediately say, that's my fault. It's because I asked it to do something it didn't want to do. And after a period from 6 months to a year, you can change that balance for going, that's what it's doing, to that's what I want it to do. So it's about getting the right environment, but you can see it from the dog's point of view as well as the sheep's point of view.
So I take it you're still available to deliver seminars like that or talks like that, is that right?
Definitely, yes. I can even bring the dog along, but
Well, I think that we're all facing a different world as we come out of this. I'm not sure exactly what it will be like, but I think anybody that's been involved in a comfort zone is going to have to stretch it, because and I think that's what a lot of people, if people are in the comfort zone, anything that's outside of that becomes fearful, and there's enough of that about. And I think that what you just said there could be a very good way, to start thinking a little bit more outside of the box or outside of the pen, perhaps.
rather than being in that fearful zone, I'd rather say it's the adventure zone. And the reason why it's an adventure is because you've never done it before. And that's far better. We all understand the comfortable zone, but the adventure zone is where things really do happen. And that's why we should be striving to go to that area.
So good things ahead.
I think we'll see a huge change in values. I think people will be more vocal, and it will be managing it, which will be a lot harder for traditional managers.
I think also the way we've seen people pull together and recognize the role of individuals that hitherto we may have ignored as not being important. I think that will be something that hopefully we will all retain. And certainly what you're doing, you've already been doing that all this time anyway, so you may be one step ahead of the curve.
It'd be nice to think. It would be nice to think that the shepherd is one step ahead of his sheep and his dogs.
We hope so. Thank you very much indeed, Chris. It's been lovely talking with you. All the best.
Cheers.